Hi there. So let's go over general information and notice to consumers. Share the screen. All right. If the property is not within the El Paso city limits, there's always a possibility it could be annexed. If that is a concern, you can always see where the closest municipality is. An appraisal is usually ordered by a buyer's lender. It is paid for by the buyer and belongs to the buyer. They go out and inspect for value, not for condition. Okay. So the seller is not required to get a or receive a copy. However, if there's an issue with value, a lot of times it is. Brokers, different agents represent different people in the transaction. We are not, as agents and brokers, we are not inspectors and we're not attorneys. We cannot give legal advice. We encourage everybody to seek the advice of an attorney if they are concerned with anything that is in the contract or the transaction. Compensation, how a buyer gets, or a buyer's agent or a seller's agent gets paid. It's always been negotiable, but now we can no longer put it in the MLS. And we have to consult directly with each agent on each side of the transaction to see if the buyer is going to have to pay the buyer's agent or the seller is willing to pay the buyer's agent. It is not fixed. Different agents charge different fees based on their services. Okay. Concrete issues. So, alkali silica is a uh, also known as concrete cancer, is a chemical reaction where concrete is compromised and it's got issues, right? So especially if you see it in swimming pools. It's in constant contact with water and can be unusable and safe. If you're worried about this, you can hire a structural engineer to test it and to check for safety. Okay. This is something new that we are all still learning about as well. So we highly encourage you to do the research. If you need a structural engineer, I'm more than happy to research that for you. Environmental concerns. If you're worried about anything in the environment like asbestos, lead-based paint, mold, pesticides, radon, toxic waste, underground storage tanks, urea formaldehyde installation, or pollutants, you are more than welcome to get an inspection for those things. I rarely see specialized inspections for those things, but it's the buyer's choice. Now, keep in mind that these forms are used across the entire state of Texas, where you do see some of these issues in certain areas. Environmental inspection, if you're worried about environmental hazards, wetlands, endangered species, also you can hire an expert for that. We do have a separate form for that. Lead-based paint. If the house was built before 1978, there's a good chance that there's lead-based paint under some layers of paint. We will give you a form called Protect Your Family from lead, and that will outline more information regarding those hazards. Okay. We also have to give you a specialized form that also discloses if the seller has any known information. Mold. If you're worried about mold, you can have an inspection done for mold. Oak wilt and diseased trees, same thing. Noise pollution. That's another issue that if somebody is worried about being very close to airports or railways or highways, the buyer is encouraged to drive around during different times of the day because that can make a difference. Okay. Expansive soils. When a house is built, the soil can contract and expand, and you will see settling. And it's important for you to talk to the builder about what things you can do, or even an inspector, to prevent, too much movement. There's also certain areas in El Paso where we see a lot of clay in the soil, and that can still happen over time, even if the house has been there for a long time. FIRPTA, Foreign Investment in Real Estate Property Act. Certain buyers who qualify as a foreign person, when they turn around to sell the property, the IRS will hold back 15% of the proceeds until they are able to file their tax return. A seller should notify the buyer whether they are a foreign person, because if they don't, and for whatever reason the money isn't collected, it could come back to haunt the buyer. Okay. You can always talk to a tax professional and attorney for more information on that. If you're worried about flood hazard, floodways, or flood insurance, the best way to nip that in the bud from the beginning is to talk to your insurance company, ask them if it's in a flood zone, because they should have the most updated FEMA maps. Those are always changing. I can check the ones that I have access to, but The most accurate ones should come from your insurance company, okay? Foreign buyers and renters. There are certain buyers and renters that are prohibited from purchasing real estate or getting leases for 1 year or more. So that's always something that you should talk to an attorney about. If it's in a historic or conservation district, you may want to get more information about the restrictions on building and remodeling in those areas. A buyer has a right to get an inspection, to confirm repairs, and to do a final walkthrough. That's why it's important for the seller to always leave utilities on, okay? You can hire an inspection to go back and to re-inspect for those things, all right? And if the buyer chooses not to and decides to do it after closing, then they're going to be in a very tough predicament because there may not be recourse at that time, okay? If it's in an HOA, they will require, if it's a mandatory HOA, it may require that fees be paid. If the buyer chooses not to pay those fees, they can eventually get foreclosed upon and get a lien filed against the property as well. Unless we have a special form regarding minerals in the contract, who owns the valuable minerals? Usually it belongs to Texas. Okay, so if you're purchasing a property that has oil wells, which we don't see here in El Paso, but if you do, then we must ensure that we have that special information about the mineral clauses and who they belong to. The multiple listing service is a database that we own as the Association of Realtors, okay? We are required to report current status, whether it's been sold, what the sales price was. The people who subscribe to it, other brokers, agents, appraisers, or professionals, do have access to that information so that they're able to provide a market evaluation, okay? Or a CMA, competitive market analysis. That's what we normally do to establish value. The broker or agent who provides the information does not verify the accuracy. The buyer should independently verify the information in the MLS. So when we pull information to show our buyers, whatever's in the MLS is based on whatever accuracy of the seller or the listing agent. We cannot guarantee that that information is accurate. So if you have any doubt regarding that, please do your research, reach out to me to confirm, and I'll give you the sources of where that information came from. Permits, if a seller altered, repaired, did construction, added to the property, another room, a swimming pool, whatever. It's encouraged for the buyer to check with the local government entities to make sure that they pulled a permit. Some things are required a permit, some things are not, but it's up to the buyer to confirm. Now, possession. This is a big deal. When you go and you sign, doesn't mean you get keys. You sign, then everybody has to get a copy. The title company has to get the original copies of signed documents. They have to get the money, the wire from the lender. And then once they get that and they confirm that they have authorization to disperse the money, then we have funding. At that point, we are able to give possession of the property. So please do not schedule a moving ban. Please don't disconnect utilities too early if you're a seller. We must ensure that everything is coordinated and everybody's on the same page. Also, if you're a buyer or you're a seller, make sure that you let us know if you're going to be out of town for closing. And let us know as soon as possible because it can get tricky. If you're out of the country, we're going to have to get a power of attorney. Depending on the country you're in, it may be very difficult to get a power of an attorney from out of the country because that original power of attorney does have to be documented at the courthouse. It's better to get the power of attorney here. If you're out of state or out of the city, but still in the US, title will probably require that a mobile notary go meet you. Okay, so please let us know so that we make sure to cover all of our bases and make sure that we don't have any glitches in the sale and in the closing. Property insurance. Okay, once you go under contract as a buyer, make sure you call your insurance immediately to make sure that the insurance is affordable. If the seller has filed an excess number of claims or if it's in a flood zone, it can affect your ability to get insurance and even qualify for the purchase. So make sure you get a quote for property insurance right away. Property values. It's cyclical. There's slower times, there's faster times, and it fluctuates. We cannot guarantee a specific future market value or future market conditions. The price of what the house sells for is based on what the buyers in the current market are willing to pay for. Okay. And whatever it sells for is whatever the seller and the buyer agree to. Residential service contract. That's also known as a home warranty. We want to make sure that if the home warranty is agreed to, that it's done by somebody that is licensed in the state. And usually it covers heating, cooling, electrical, plumbing, and a lot of the major appliances. Okay. Every home warranty company is different. There's an upfront service, premium, right, for 1 or 2 years. And then after that, when a homeowner has to make a call for a service, then there's a service fee. Okay. It runs anywhere between, I think, $70 and $90, depending on the company that you're with. So they all have different coverages, they all have limitations. Make sure you go over everything in detail. And honestly, in my professional opinion, it all boils down to how good the local rep is at advocating for the client. Okay. If you're near an international border, it could be a little stickier, right? Texas law may prohibit the sale of certain properties that are lacking water and sewer. Even the sale of such property is permitted. A buyer may face additional restrictions under Texas law because of the basic infrastructure that's missing. So make sure that you check on those things, that you're aware. We cannot guarantee that the sale is permitted under Texas law. Consult with an attorney. School boundaries. So school boundaries can change and can be difficult to determine. If you are very concerned about what school your child goes to, make sure you call the school district and you verify, because we cannot guarantee. Okay. Septic tanks and on-sewer site facilities. So we don't deal with septic tanks as much, but on occasion we do have some. So there's special maintenance required, and it's important to make sure that we do our research, make sure that they're registered, the permit has been pulled, and we have some information on that. If you're worried about sex offenders, you can go to this website and you can check to see which sex offenders are in the area. Square footage. If we cannot guarantee the square footage, you can send 3 monkeys in to measure and get 3 different measurements. But the central appraisal, the tax office will have their square footage based on whatever the builder submitted when they pulled the permit. Then an appraiser can go in and still have a different measurement. So if you're worried about measurements, you can always hire an appraiser or go in yourself and measure. But I do recommend an appraiser because they are much better at getting accurate readings. All right, statutory tax district, municipal utility district. So that's also known as a MUD. There are some areas in El Paso that are under MUD. So there's going to be an extra fee that's tacked onto your taxes for this special district. It's a public improvement district, basically. The city is charging extra money for the maintenance and the upkeep of certain, or the development of certain things like public walking trails or parks. Okay. Surveillance. If you're a seller, please let your agent know, or me, if I'm your agent, or if you're a buyer and you're worried, just be aware that there could be video recording, audio and video, or just video, right? So just be very careful when walking into a property, because that can get very tricky and we don't want any problems. Share your opinions after you've left the house and you're far enough away from the house that we don't have to worry about audio picking up information. Survey. Survey identifies the boundaries and any kind of utility lines and any issues that we might have. We should get it early enough to know if there's any issues. And if we have to order one, we still have a few days after receiving it to put in writing any objections. Synthetic stucco is an issue in the entire state of Texas. In certain areas that are much more humid, we see a lot more things like moisture and wood rot issues. Not so much in El Paso. Doesn't mean it won't exist here, but it's not as common. When a property is sold, the title company will pull the prorated amount that the seller owes and give it to the buyer as a credit. So at the end of the year, the buyer will have enough money saved or credited to them, either cash or in escrow, to make the entire year's worth of payments. Okay. Now, The title company will estimate what it is. Now, if the seller is qualifies for something like homestead or over 65, those will not convey with the new buyer. So just be aware of that. Termination option. In the contract, we have something called the termination option. We normally call it the option period. So we execute on a Monday. Day one is, the options period starts immediately. And based on whatever number of days we put in the contract, the buyer has those days as the unrestricted right to terminate. They can wake up and say the sky is blue and decide to cancel, right? But they do have to pay a fee for it, and that fee is due within 3 days. Okay. Now, most buyers use that time to get inspections done and to negotiate repairs. That's why it's very important to get the inspections ordered immediately so as not to lose some of those precious days for negotiating. We don't really see tidewaters because we're not oceanfront properties. We don't have oceanfront properties here. You will get, you have the right to get either title insurance or an abstract of title. Most sales have title insurance. The title company will pull the information, send the buyers something called the commitment that will outline anything they showed as liens against the property. If any red flags appear, then we have time to deal with that. Or if you want to take it a step further and hire an attorney to do an abstract, it's like pulling the history of ownership. Okay. That usually happens when you have a property that's owned within the same family and the transfer title wasn't recorded every time. Utilities. They should be on when the property goes under contract and they should stay on all the way up to closing. Water level fluctuations. If we have a property that's lakefront, just letting you know that you could have water level fluctuations. We really don't have a lot of those. Also, water wells. It's important to get an inspection done, right? Very rarely do we see those here, but I have seen a few in my time. And then wire fraud. It's very important that if you ever get an email from anybody saying that the wiring instructions have changed, you do not reply to the email. You pick up the phone and you call me immediately. That should never be the case. That is a big indicator of wire fraud. Even if you get an email saying you should send money to this account, you pick up the phone and you call me. We want to make sure that we don't have any wire fraud because there's a lot of hacking, because once you send that wire out, it is gone. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to help and answer any concerns you have. Bye-bye.